All right, here we go, everyone. We're going to look at Unit 6. This will be broken up into two videos at a minimum. Unit 6, 1865 to 1898. All right, with 1865, we've got the end of the Civil War. All right, and then that's going to take us to really the Spanish, to be more specific, the Spanish-American War. All right, which we'll get to in Unit 7. But this time period, although specifically it's the end of the Civil War and then it's the Spanish-American War, this time period is going to cover two big things. All right, it's going to cover number one, the Second Industrial Revolution, and the second thing it's going to cover is, of course, the progressive. It's going to introduce us to the progressive era. All right, the progressive era is going to dip into the 1900s, obviously. It's going to go past the turn of the century, but these are the two big things. And before, we're going to really hone in on this Second Industrial Revolution today. All right, and with the Second Industrial Revolution, there were three things that made this Second Industrial Revolution possible. Number one, when is it? It's 1870s. It's early 1870 to, I'm going to take us to just make it nice and solid, 1900. All right. If you dip into, if you say 1914, which is the start of World War I, that's fine. But it really is it's really this 30 years between 1870 and 1900 before the progressives take over and before Woodrow Wilson tries to rein this thing in. So these are the dates of it. Okay. But it's possible by three things. Number one, westward expansion. All right, there is no second industrial revolution without westward expansion. Number two, because this had all the resources. Number two, of course, immigration. You can't have an industrial revolution and you can't industrialize a country without having workers for it, especially cheap, unskilled laborers. Number three, of course, rise of the corporation. All right. The corporation is what was fueling the second industrial revolution, because the corporation, we can make a great connection here. All right. The corporation is living off of the resources from westward expansion. And then all of the immigrants are working for the corporation and they're getting all their goods from the westward expansion. All right. So this is the heart of why and how the second industrial revolution was possible. Now, what we're going to do with the second industrial revolution here, in order to get a 5 and a 7 out of 7 on your DBQ, is we're going to talk about how this second industrial revolution affected religion, culture, politics, society, and the economy, and then what groups in particular were affected. So that's, again, that looks good. That's, again, what we're going to look at and what you need to write about on your DBQ. Here's your topic. I did this in the video last night. Here's your topic. How did it affect religion, culture, politics, society, and the economy? And then particularly what groups were affected by it. Okay? So let's start with the lead up to this unit, kind of where this thing starts. All right? Let's start us off with westward expansion. Let's look a little bit at westward expansion. All right, let's contextualize here how westward expansion kicks off. All right, so if we look at just basic westward expansion, this is obviously post-Civil War. Okay, by the way, this is chapter 15. This was a very important chapter. You should go back and reread it. I've said that 1,000 times. When we look at westward expansion, okay, post-Civil War especially, remember the Republicans passed the Homestead Act in 1862, which was during the American Civil War. But westward expansion post-Civil War was all about expanding wealth, which means you had to expand the railroad, and you had to expand it all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. It was called the Pacific Railroad. This is America's first corporation, right? It is a sign of big business in America. Okay? This railroad and expanding the railroad, you couldn't do it without land. All right? And if you're going to need more land and you're trying to expand westward, you're going to have a Native American, quote, problem. because you need to incorporate the West. You need to remove those Native Americans in order to develop more of that land. Now, who built the railroad in the West? We said, really, remember the Chinese built it. And in 1882, the United States is actually going to pass the Chinese Exclusion Act, all right, which is going to ban immigration from China, even though they built the railroad because they were cheap labor in the West. We're going to ban the Chinese with the in 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which obviously greatly affected Chinese immigration to the United States. The second big thing with Western migration that you should remember is it created what's known as like these boom towns, okay, overnight. And I mean, it's really simple. What are these boom towns? It's basically where Western towns kind of exploded overnight, right? These are the very famous like John Wayne movies. These are the cowboy movies maybe you watched with grandpa or you've seen on TV, kind of the tumbleweed through the road and these saloons and all these different places in the West and these Western films. These are these boom towns that pop up overnight, literally overnight, because of the expansion of the railroad and because of this industrial revolution occurring. These boom towns were important because they changed culture in the West. They encouraged migration, but also they created greater opportunities for women. All right. They created greater opportunities. They get more opportunities. And eventually, what's going to happen is they're going to get the right to vote out in Wyoming and Utah and Colorado. It starts in the West because the West was an area of experimentation, of different types of changes, because it broke away. Western expansion broke away. It broke from Eastern cultural norms. All right, that's a cultural change. When we say RCPSE, that's a change in culture and that's a change in society. So the change in culture here, breaking away from these Eastern norms, affected society as seen through women and suffrage. Okay, we're going to move on now to, I'm just going to right here. Okay, we're going to move on now to talking about the effect on Native Americans. All right. So we're going to look at, can I do this here? We're going to look at Native Americans, basically Native Americans from 1865 to 1900. And we'll say 1900. So what's going on with Native Americans? How are they affected? How are they impacted? And specifically, how are they impacted and affected during this time period? What is going on with natives? The two go hand in hand. It's not a coincidence that I just talked about westward expansion, and now I'm going to talk about Native Americans because they were the ones greatly affected. So let's get specific here, okay? Let's start with President Grant. All right, President Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, his proposal, he's got Christian influencers in his ear. He proposes, it's called Grant's, quote, peace policy with the natives. So it's not like extermination of the Native American people, thank God. It's not that. It's more of like this peace policy of what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate the West still. All right, so that was big. The Republicans and even the radical Republicans during Reconstruction in the 1870s, when Grant is president, they were obsessed with incorporating the West because the Republicans were the protector of big business, right? The Republicans were the protector of big business. And if you're protecting big business and you're promoting big business, one of the things you must do is provide a lifeline, something for those big businesses to continue to thrive off of. And those were the natural resources and the labor and utilizing all of the things in the West. So what Grant does is he creates these Indian boarding schools. All right. It sounds nice. Like it sounds like, okay, they're just boarding schools. It's not horrible, but actually it turned out to be pretty horrible for the people in them. This was forced assimilation, right? It was basically trying to Americanize them with white culture. And these Indian boarding schools, ultimately, what they did is they destroyed the Native American culture, all right, language, religion, and general society at this time. So these Indian boarding schools, although it was called a peace policy, were not very peaceful on the Native Americans. The United States federal government's going to double down on its Native American policy, and that is seen through the 1887 Dawes Severity Act. In 1887. All right, here's what the Dawes Act says. This is really important with Native Americans. You can write about this in your FRQ, even if you get something about the West. So if the prompt is not particularly on Native Americans, you can still talk about Native Americans with the Dawes Act. What the Dawes Act did is it was a law passed that broke up Native American land in the West. Okay? It tried to promote Native American land ownership. So it basically was, hey, as the United States government, we'll buy it from you. We'll break it up, we'll buy it from you, and then we'll let you keep some of it as Native Americans to own it. We'll kind of like rent it from you. However, this turned out, shocker, this turned out to be a disaster for Native Americans, okay, the Dawes Act. What it did is it actually resulted in 66% of Native Americans lost their native land. All right. So the Dawes Act was about breaking up land, trying to promote Native American ownership, but essentially we took it from them and forced them out of it. And nearly 2/3 of people, Native Americans, lost their land. All right. We're going to look now at, I mentioned this in class the other day. This is, we're going to look at George Custer, right? General George Custer's last stand. And this last stand with Custer, all right, occurs at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Now, the Battle of Little Bighorn is in 1874. It's in a different color. Getting a little low here. 1874. And this was about gold. All right, so we were fighting the Native Americans. George Custer was fighting the Native Americans at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1874 because we had found gold on their lands. And what lands are we particularly talking about? The Dakotas, North and South Dakota. All right. Another big horrible thing for the Native Americans was the battle at Wounded Knee. This is a U.S. victory. This is 1898. It is a U.S. victory. Okay. But this was where the United States, as a response to the Sand Creek Massacre that the Native Americans did on the United States, this was a horrible defeat for the Native Americans. A lot of innocent people were killed here by the United States at that time. And one of the things I'm going to end with for Native Americans during this time, because it was a real big threat to white people, and it affected white people's views on natives at that time. Do I have enough room? And this was the beginning of the ghost dance movement. So what was this ghost dance movement? This is really going to be ghost dance is really going to pop out in the 1890s. All right, the Native Americans at the time with the ghost dance, it's not something they really did before, but this was about resurrecting. It was like the resurrection of the buffalo. It was sacred dances and traditions to try to like resurrect the buffalo that was destroyed by the United States and partially by Native Americans. However, the thing with the ghost dance movement, why it's so important, is because this was viewed as a threat to whites. All right. They didn't like this. It was very threatening to white people. They wanted to try to extinguish the ghost dance. And if you try to end and extinguish the ghost dance, that's eventually going to, at some point, result in the ending of the Native American movement and experience in North America. So that for right now is just Native Americans and westward expansion. All right. That's kind of the gist of it. That's the heart of it. I, of course, always recommend studying more, in greater detail for these things. But to be totally honest, if you have a really good idea as to how, I get my screen to move here, as to like the effects, westward expansion, all right, what it was, why it happened, westward expansion, and then its effect on Native American peoples between 1865 and 1900 in this country. If you can articulate that, which we did in just like 10 minutes here or 15 minutes, you're going to have a really solid understanding of that time period and changes in the economy and changes in society and politics. So again, just to recap, talked about Native Americans, talked about why and how we expanded westward and its effect there. And then we started this video with the three really main things that give us the second industrial revolution: the corporation, immigration, and of course, westward expansion, all at the heart of it. These things are all what I'm trying to show you in APUSH, and what they want you to look for on the 8th of May is these things post-Civil War, these movements, these different vocab words, they all are connected. All right. Everything's connected here. And it's showing how that America is transforming ultimately into an industrial capitalist economy and nation. That's what the goal of this is trying to show you.